Alright, so everybody loves season 1 of The Simpsons. Okay, maybe not everyone. Maybe it's like, some people love it, everyone else kinda tolerates it. But we can all agree that it's a season of television that has a very distinct flavor to it, a very unique style and sensibility it brings, both to The Simpsons as a series and the television landscape as a whole. But what are the characteristics of a season 1 episode? When you say something feels like season 1, what exactly does that mean? What defined this era of The Simpsons? I don't know. Smiling Joe Fission doesn't know either, but maybe in the next 10 minutes or so we can figure it out. First of all, we gotta address the elephant in the room. YouTube is a visual medium, and certainly season 1's visual aesthetic stands out. There's definitely a roughness to the animation as a whole. Obviously, this makes some sense. The animation department had a lot of stuff to figure out. The original cut of the pilot episode, Some Enchanted Evening, was famously terrible looking, and like half that episode got reshot. The characters are noticeably more rubbery, the backgrounds lack detail, the color contrast is all over the place. Characters seem to gain and lose weight between shots. Crowd scenes in particular are a consistent source of trouble in this season. Even later episodes, like The Telltale Head, have some pretty rough moments. Barney, what is happening to your face? This scene in an early episode, Homer's Odyssey, is probably the worst visual moment in all of The Simpsons. What is going on with some of these faces? Look at this guy. There is definitely a divide between early season 1 and late season 1. I would say the first 4 production episodes are its own visual thing. You look at Some Enchanted Evening, to Bart the Genius, to Homer's Odyssey, to There's No Disgrace Like Home, and see a lot of weird crap. I'd argue 1F05, Bart the General, is where the character models and backgrounds really come together. Despite improvements, however, even these later episodes still have their own visual quirks. The characters' jaws seem to detach much further than in the later seasons. And season 1 was way more comfortable with characters looking straight on toward the camera. Later seasons tend to go for the 3/4 angle, this one didn't mind that head-on look so much. That being said, season 1 should get a lot of credit for its storyboarding and cinematography. Even though they were still learning, they were ambitious with their camera angles. Season 1 is fond of putting the camera in weird places, going for visual distortion jokes, just trying weird stuff. Sure, the animation lacks polish, but it's surprisingly ambitious. In terms of story selection, season 1 leans very heavily on Homer and Bart. It has a reputation for being a very Bart-centric season, for good reason, but there's an argument that Homer is the POV character more often. Season 1 contains 5 episodes framed around Homer's point of view, 4 episodes for Bart, 1 for Lisa, 1 for Marge, 1 about Krusty the Clown. And then there's Some Enchanted Evening, which shifts its POV so much, we'll just say it's an ensemble piece. In most of Homer's episode, Bart is the main supporting character. Like Homer's Odyssey and Homer's Night Out, both start out with Bart adventures, and then the story shifts to his dad. Or they'll pair off Homer and Bart together in other examples. Likewise, Bart episodes tend to involve his relationship with his father in some capacity. Even examples that are more ensemble-driven, they still get a father-son moment in there. Now, if it's not a Homer and Bart episode, it's probably about Homer and Marge. Season 1 is very fond of marriage crisis episodes, featured in 3 of the 13 total. This is like a ridiculously high percentage of stories. This would be like if season 4 had Marge kick Homer out of the house 5 or 6 different times. No wonder people eventually got sick of these. From a characterization standpoint, Homer and Lisa stand out as the oddities in the family. The show had much more quickly grasped Marge, Bart, and Maggie's personalities. The mom, the prankster, the baby who falls down. Homer and Lisa, by contrast, tended to evolve more over time. Lisa, for example, is significantly more bratty and immature during this era. They were very fond of having she and Bart just argue incessantly back and forth, usually about something pointless. When they go to the opera in Bart the Genius, and the guys are making jokes the whole time, Lisa joins in the laughter. I think later versions of this scene would have Lisa getting ticked off at their behavior. We do see the more adult-like, conscientious version of Lisa, to be fair. She's certainly portrayed maturely and sympathetically in Moaning Lisa. There's just an extra streak of mischievousness and wildness to her in season 1. Honestly, I kinda miss this aspect of her personality. Smart, mischievous Lisa is the most fun Lisa, in my opinion. Season 1 Homer, much like his later incarnations, is obviously marked by his extreme stupidity. They devote the final act of Call of the Simpsons to that very aspect. But Season 1 Homer had this weird principled bent to him, where he'll regularly show up to deliver some kind of life lesson or big idea. He'll go on and on about the code of the schoolyard, tell Bart about the importance of popularity, declare himself an experienced woodsman. Or you'll see him getting obsessed with improving his family, obsessed with safety, or delivering a big speech at the end of Homer's night out. Some of his principled stances are certainly portrayed ironically, an example not to follow, but Season 1 Homer is significantly more high-minded than in later seasons. For the family as a whole, Season 1 is extremely consistent in portraying The Simpsons as being strapped for cash. Not in poverty or anything, but certainly living paycheck to paycheck, not having a lot of savings. Money woes are a constant theme in this season. The show loves to highlight how dumpy the Simpsons are as a family, how low rent their entire existence is. A character like Ned Flanders isn't used as a hyper-Christian or anything yet, he's instead more of a character foil as someone who's doing better than them. Speaking of which, the secondary characters are pretty much inconsistent across the board, both in terms of their characterization, appearance, and their voices. We all remember Black Smithers and his counterparts White Officer Lou and White Judge Snyder. Moe and Chief Wiggum had black hair back then. Barney used to be a blonde. You could tell they were reconsidering Moe and Barney's hair color mid-season because their more traditional hair colors do appear. Honestly, Season 1 should be called the Season of Weird Springfield, because it's practically a different show than what we're used to. Mr. Burns' office looks totally different, Moe's bar changes color several times over the course of the season. Every episode seems to feature these one-off secondary characters that are never seen again. Remember this bowling guy? Remember this lawyer? Remember these families? There's a real unfamiliarity to the characters and locations in Season 1. It's kinda neat, to be honest. We're so used to them inserting characters we know into new roles. Instead, seeing all these randos everywhere makes Springfield feel like this big place full of chance encounters. Season 1 Springfield is less structured, more amorphous and random. The series was not against having featured guest stars, although it hadn't reached the level of having one new guest per episode. They're featured in 5 of the 13 stories. The idea of a guest star playing themselves is a completely foreign concept to Season 1. It would kind of betray the down-to-earth atmosphere they work so hard to create. Season 1, by the way, is correct in this regard. Guest stars playing themselves is way less interesting. More of this, less of this. In terms of the joke writing, Season 1 hates cutaway jokes, just absolutely despises them. Maybe it's just that they're not technically invented yet, but this is still a show that keeps its humors planted in where we currently are. Bart's prank calls are about the closest we get. The characters still do watch a decent amount of television, however. It's not to the degree later seasons do it. It's not like we're getting commercial parodies every week. Troy McClure isn't around yet. But TV characters watching TV was a concept the show liked from the very beginning. Instead of cutaway jokes, Season 1 utilizes fantasy and dream sequences as a primary change of pace tool. These are some of the most surreal and wacky jokes throughout the whole season. Fantasy sequences will always be a thing on The Simpsons, but they stand out much more in a grounded season like this one. I think grounded is probably the best descriptor for the jokes as a whole. This is a season that's written very in-universe. Parodies and real-world references are relatively more rare. They don't go for the meta joke very often. It's like Grandpa's Family Jewels, Bart's commentary about TV miracles, cartoons being on primetime, and frosty chocolate milkshakes. That's about it. Season 1 doesn't wink at the audience. It hates the idea of characters being aware that they're behaving like TV characters. Observational and character-driven humor are their bread and butter. Maybe we don't need this scene to go on as long as it does. Maybe we don't need this guy literally pointing at signs. But it's cool that they let the characters experience the world at their own pace. They don't just yada yada stuff and go straight for the quick joke. I've tried to avoid using the C word to describe Season 1 as a whole, but there's no better word to describe its aesthetic than charming. Season 1 is easily The Simpsons' most charming year of television. I love it for the same kind of reasons why I love A Charlie Brown Christmas, for example. And I'm trying to say this in the least condescending way possible. But I love A Charlie Brown Christmas for its rawness, its earnestness. that it sometimes makes puzzling decisions, like what are these line deliveries, but you can tell a lot of thought and effort was put into it. Hiring children to play these characters, despite these stilted deliveries, was the point, was the creative decision. It feels very authentic. Season 1 of The Simpsons is the same way. They're still figuring things out. Obviously not everything is going to be this structured machine that pumps out jokes. It's like in the later seasons, they decided every script had to be crammed with a set number of jokes per minute. Whereas Season 1 just feels so much more relaxed and loose, that it can let scenes breathe a little more. It's not constantly trying to think of shtick. Season 1 wouldn't spend hours and hours trying to think of a funny name for Colonel Hapablap. The later seasons can sometimes feel a little sweaty, whereas Season 1 is always so fresh and so clean. Almost all these observations are given with the benefit of hindsight, obviously. It's easy to call these episodes too sitcom-y, like TGIF episodes or something, in today's environment. But the subversiveness of these messages really were quite revolutionary, even if it feels antiquated now. I really like that The Simpsons has this sort of relic of a season, that it has one toe dipped in this pool of sitcom-y standards, grounding the whole series. It puts into context how much the show has changed over time, how much television in general has changed. That The Simpsons used to be a show that would think they need to put a disclaimer about war at the end of a parody, that they existed in a world where they would need to do this. I'm not advocating Season 1 only being great as a throwback to a bygone era. I just think there's something compelling about removing that extra layer of polish, seeing the show at its most raw and unstructured. This is The Simpsons at its most naked, and it is still compelling to watch. I'm not entirely done covering Season 1, but I'll just leave it here for now. Let me know in the comments what you think of The Simpsons' first season, and what you think its main characteristics are. Also, no arguing about whether the first season is part of the golden or classic era of The Simpsons. It clearly is. If you must fight it out, please use these aggression therapy mallets. As always, thanks for watching.